Hello and welcome to 6 Client Tips for Puppy Socialization with Jackie Neilson, DVM, DACVB. I'm Christy Keith, Senior Communications Strategist for Fear Free. And before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to take care of a few small housekeeping items. First, we'd like to thank our friends and Fear Free sponsors at Elanco for making this webinar possible. We'd also like to thank all of you for making time for us this evening. Next, yes, CE is available for this webinar, but it is only available for those of you who are viewing it live. If you're watching the recorded version, there's unfortunately no CE that you can apply for that at this time. For those of you who are here attending live, I'll be sending an email immediately after this presentation that will contain a link to the survey that you will need to take to get RACE CE. In the final question in the survey, there is a link to download a CE certificate that you can fill in with your name. However, that certificate is meaningless unless you submit the survey and it's processed through RACE. We're just providing it to you as a convenience for you. And so please do fill out the survey and make sure you've submitted it and that you provide accurate contact information in the survey. The survey will close. This is a very short window that you have to take it, because of the category of education this is considered interactive. So we only have 3 business days essentially to turn in your names. So it will be closing on the next Tuesday afternoon, which I believe is October 29th at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So please just, it's only 4 questions, just quickly take it the minute you get the link. And then that will be done. If you don't receive an email from me this evening, contact me at fearfreepets@gmail.com. Please don't wait, as if you contact me after the survey is closed on Tuesday, I won't be able to help you. Once it's closed, it's closed. The recorded version of this webinar will be available within around 1 week at fearfreepets.com/webinars. Dr. Neilson should have time for a few questions at the end, but please ask them using the Q&A window, not the chat window, as soon as they occur to you rather than hoarding them. We all know hoarding is bad. And now that all that housekeeping is done, it's my great pleasure to introduce our presenter. Dr. Neilson obtained her doctorate of veterinary medicine degree with honors from the University of Florida College of Veterinary Medicine. Following graduation, she moved to Oregon and entered small animal private practice. After 2 years in private practice, Dr. Neilson was selected as the first conforming behavioral resident at the UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine. There, she successfully completed her 2-year residency in animal behavior and passed the board certification process to become a diplomate of the American College of Veterinary Behaviorists in 1997. Dr. Neilson is a Fear Free certified professional, of course, and currently a regional consulting veterinarian for Elanco. Thank you for being with us tonight, Dr. Neilson. Please take it away.
Exam room 2, new client, new puppy visit. It can interrupt your day in the most wonderful of ways, with wiggles, puppy breath, wrinkles, and snuggles. But it's also an appointment where you will ideally transfer a significant quantity of critical medical and behavioral information to a new, often distracted pet parent. The first step in being successful at this challenging communication is having a clear roadmap of what you want to deliver. That's what this webinar is about, giving you 6 client tips as they relate to one of the subjects you need to address, puppy socialization. By sharing the tips and the data behind those tips, your entire team can feel confident delivering socialization information to new puppy parents, ensuring the best possible behavioral development for that puppy. Before we get to the first tip, let's make sure we are all on the same page regarding the subject, socialization. The dictionary defines socialization as the activity of mixing socially with others and the process of learning to behave in a way that is acceptable to society. The latter definition is what we are referring to when we talk about socializing a puppy. We want our pups to develop social skills that allow them to be comfortable with who and what they encounter during their lifetime. If we are being grammatical sticklers, socialization truly would just refer to the people, the who, maybe people and other animals, and not the what, places, objects, and sounds they may encounter. However, it's common practice to broaden that term, socialization, to include not just social interactions, but also exposure to a variety of stimuli, including places, objects, and sounds. You likely have heard of sensitive socialization periods. Canine sensitive socialization periods are windows of time that have been established by research that if a pup is not exposed to certain stimuli, like other dogs, people, cats, etc., during those periods, they may be at significant risk of developing problems if exposed to those stimuli later in life. This window of time, which I will further define in a moment, leads us though to our very first client tip. And that's tip number 1. Don't delay, socialize today. Why today? Well, the clock is ticking on that sensitive socialization period. Many references quote the window to be about between 3 and 12 weeks of age, and some go as high as 14 weeks of age. The research I'm quoting here, conducted by Friedman et al. In the early 1960s, concluded that the sensitive socialization period to humans was actually 2.5 to somewhere between 9 and 13 weeks of age. Regardless of which exact week you use, what you'll notice is that most pups come to us, obviously, for their first visit around 8 or 9 weeks of age, and we are already well into this socialization window. Pet parents can't delay. They really need to start socialization today during that first puppy visit. To provide a little more background on some of the research in Friedman's study, litters of puppies were placed with their mothers to live in a 1-acre field without any relevant human exposure. But then at prescribed weeks, and those were actually 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 5 weeks, and 7 weeks and 9 weeks, some of the pups were taken out of the field daily for just a week of time for 3 30-minute periods. So a total of an hour and a half a day for contact with humans. What they saw during those week-long periods at these different developmental times in that puppy's life is that the 2 and 3 week old puppies showed very little fear of humans, but they really didn't possess the motor skills to fully interact with those humans during their daily sessions. As they got a little bit older, the puppies started to have a little apprehension or fear towards the humans when initially engaging with them during those 3 30-minute periods. And what came out of that, what they found was that both from a motor skill development scenario and also their behavioral responses, that about 7 weeks of age, they were the most receptive to human socialization. I do want to point out that there were a subset group of puppies that got no human contact until after 14 weeks of life. When they finally, between 14 and 16 weeks of life, got to engage with humans, they scored significantly lower on sociability to humans, and that persisted despite attempts to overcome it with daily handling sessions. These findings really establish that puppies need good socialization experiences with humans before 14 weeks of age. And of course, there were limitations on this study. It's a small study size, they use specific breeds, but even with those limitations, we still gained some valuable information about getting our puppies exposed to humans at an early age. Other research over the decades has reinforced this sensitive socialization period. A recent published paper used the power of the internet to gather information. Over 3,200 Finnish dog owners participated in a validated online questionnaire. Data analysis found that fearful dogs were more likely to have received substandard maternal care, so the bitch was not as good at caring for them, but also had less socialization in the first 3 months of life than their confident counterparts. Once again, this reinforces the importance of socialization in that first 12 weeks of life for our puppies. But this does pose a bit of a conundrum for some veterinarians, as they have concerns with the window of susceptibility to infectious diseases overlapping with that sensitive socialization period. As a reminder, the window of susceptibility is a period of time when the maternally derived antibodies are dropping and no longer protecting the dog from diseases like distemper and parvo. And our vaccinations have not yet provided the protective immunity for the puppy. Unfortunately, some vets address this concern by advising owners to keep the puppy at home until the vaccine series is completed at 16 weeks of age. But this carries a profound behavioral risk of having a poorly socialized adult dog. Let's consider those behavioral risks in numbers. 40% of dogs relinquished to shelters have at least one behavioral reason cited as a reason for relinquishment. If we consider that about estimated 3.3 million dogs are estimated to enter the U.S. shelter system each year, doing that math suggests that problematic behavior contributes to over 1 million dogs entering shelters in the U.S. each year. If we contrast this with a study that specifically tracked the risk of puppies acquiring canine parvovirus in a group of almost 300 pups that attended a puppy socialization class under 16 weeks of age. So they were under the time where you would consider them done with their vaccine series. Now, all the pups had gotten at least one vaccine, but what they found was that none of these pups contracted parvovirus. So looking at this risk-benefit analysis really led to a position statement developed by the American Veterinary Society of Animal Behavior to address the importance of puppy socialization and when it should occur. In this statement, it says very clearly that AVSAB believes that it should be the standard of care for puppies to receive socialization before they are fully vaccinated. And I'm certainly an advocate as well of this and encourage everyone listening to adopt this advice. As passionate as I am about the don't delay, socialize today tip, and I am passionate about it, we need to get those pups out getting socialized. Infectious disease mitigation should be on our radar, of course, and leads us to this tip number 2, and that is socialize in smart places. Only recommend puppy classes that use appropriate cleaning and disinfection protocols. Walking puppies through neighborhoods, keep them on the concrete sidewalks. I'm not saying you couldn't get an infectious disease there, but it limits it versus going to maybe perhaps an organic material. And really that socialize in smart places, probably the best thing we can do is help owners know where not to take their puppies. I think owners think about parks and areas where people congregate as easy socialization opportunities, but they are not the best from that disease mitigation standpoint. So avoid dog-dense public spaces like dog parks or rest stops. I wouldn't have my puppy going around areas where there's lots of organic material, where other animals may have defecated and left behind some virus in that environment. And certainly I would avoid areas with unknown or low vaccination rates. For tip number 3, let's stay on important medical recommendations during the sensitive socialization periods and beyond. Knowing that most young pups are infected with roundworms, and by the way, you're watching a video right now of roundworms in the intestines of a dog. It's collected via a pill camera. So this dog with roundworms had swallowed a little camera, and now we're getting to see what they look like inside the intestines. We know that most puppies come with a roundworm infection, thanks to their mom who gave it to them transplacentally or from transmammary routes. And so we are going to want to obviously be deworming our puppies, and we need to keep them on year-round broad-spectrum parasite control. So of course, coverage of both external and internal parasites is recommended. Owners are often more compliant with our external parasiticide recommendations because they can see the parasites on the outside, the fleas and ticks. But of course, we know it's critically important to have protection against the internal parasites: heartworm, roundworm, hookworm, whipworm, tapeworm. So consideration of getting them on a broad spectrum parasite control, great ones that have young ages to start at, are great suggestions for our clients. And of course, it's not just for the pet that we want to keep healthy. The CDC recognizes that roundworms are a neglected parasite of concern in the United States due to their zoonotic risk. People are susceptible to ocular and visceral larval migrans, and by inadvertently ingesting an infected roundworm egg, they can lead to blindness and reduction even in cognitive function. So what does this risk look like? A 2018 review paper found that 1 out of every 5 public spaces is contaminated with Toxocara or roundworm eggs, putting once again both humans and pets at risk of infection or reinfection. We also know that puppies less than 12 weeks have been implicated as a primary source of contamination of Toxocara eggs in the environment. And keep in mind that a single adult roundworm can lay up to 85,000 eggs per day. So as part of our socialization tips, we need to make sure that we are putting these puppies on broad spectrum products that deworm monthly. If you capture this video, this will remind us how puppies, young pups, explore their world, and that is through their mouths. So even in their own yards, if they are shedding those Toxocara eggs, they can, once again, reinfect themselves by playing around in the dirt and putting it in their mouth and swallowing some eggs in the process. This fascinating 2018 study on roundworm eggs picked up on the feet of dogs and dog owners when walking their dogs reinforces, once again, the CAPC and CDC recommendations for deworming our dogs on a regular basis. When they returned home from a walk, 19% of the time, dogs had brought back Toxocara eggs with them on their paws from that walk. Their humans tracked home Toxocara eggs 11% of the time. So 1 out of every 10 walks came home with eggs on their shoes. So I guess that's a good reason not to wear your shoes in the house. But again, it speaks to the need for us to stay vigilant as a profession on recommending year-round broad-spectrum deworming. Let's move on to socialization tip number 4. It's not enough to just expose our pups to different social experiences. We need to make sure that those experiences are enjoyable for the pup. One thing we can share with our owners is what a stressed and relaxed dog looks like or puppy looks like. This great handout available through Fear Free shows some of those body postures we are going to tell our owners to look for in their puppy. We want them to have a soft, loose face, almond-shaped eyes with soft eyes. Their ears are neutral. They're not flattened. They're holding their body in a relaxed posture as well. Their tail is kind of level, and for whatever the breed they are, appropriately held at kind of a neutral position and wagging usually. And of course, we're avoiding things like having a tucked tail, the ears pulled back, the the dog trembling, obviously, panting, or looking really stressed. So those are the things we don't want to see in our puppies when we're trying to socialize them. One of the ways we can help our pups have a good experience is pairing that socialization with an item, something, usually a food item, but something that makes them feel really good, to make it a really positive experience. In this particular scenario, this pup has been taken to a local coffee establishment, Starbucks here, and is getting a puppuccino as people are walking by and getting exposed. Different people are stopping to kind of interact or engage with the puppy. So it's turning into a really fun and good, positive experience engaging with a variety of different types of people. And that's our goal, is we want to have different people of different heights, ages, genders, ethnicities, etc. And of course, you don't have to use puppuccinos, and some of you may be cringing at the chance of perhaps a little loose stool there, and puppy treats also work. Tip number 5. Tip number 5 is get out if overwhelmed. We have to make sure that owners know that if the pup shows fear, not only is it acceptable to leave, but it is critical that they do not continue to overwhelm that dog. They need to get out if the pup is overwhelmed, because a negative experience during that sensitive socialization period can really create a problematic long-term behavior. So when I think about this, knowing what the puppy looks like and saying, retreat if the puppy starts to really act scared, I do consider, where do people take their pets to socialize them? Here's another socialization activity with a little puppy here, and it's great from the standpoint you can see some children in the background, so getting exposed to children. This is wine tasting event with your new puppy. But one of the problems with this from a human perspective may be that if the humans are going to wine taste and they're on their second wine of the flight, and the puppy starts to get scared, they may not be willing to leave. They just have to be willing, or have someone else available that's willing to exit with the puppy, to get out if the puppy gets overwhelmed, or adjust their seating arrangements so they can make sure the puppy is comfortable. Once again, outdoor restaurants that are pet friendly, another opportunity to engage with people with likely low disease rates, so a nice kind of smart space to socialize. But what if that puppy got scared right when dinner was delivered? Once again, you just have to make sure your owners know that they should not be on their own agenda, the human agenda, but this is about the puppy. So certainly you can use these venues, just realizing that we have to be able to make sure our owners know they need to be able to exit if the puppy is overwhelmed. So out if overwhelmed. In this next video that I'll show you, this puppy's out on a walk, so a socialization opportunity where two dogs, and I don't think you're going to be able to get the audio, but you'll see the puppy's reaction. Two dogs on a balcony of a house come out and start barking at the puppy. And, oops, sorry, it did not play. Let's try that again. You'll see the puppy startle. Okay, so hopefully you caught that, but certainly that's not great. We would have ideally liked that never to have happened. But now what that human has to do is say, okay, we are not going to continue on our walk in the direction we were going. We will retreat, and they bring out their treats once they get far enough away where the puppy's relaxed, and start rewarding it and not making it any worse by continuing on and forcing that puppy into an overwhelming situation. The final tip that I want to share with you is tip number 6, and that is socialize for the present and the future. When I think about the future, we have to think about not only the long-term future, but even maybe the next season. So I think about next season and next decade. I happen to live in a fairly rainy part of the United States. I live in the Portland, Oregon, the Pacific Northwest, and a lot of our owners get their puppies during the summertime. It makes sense. Maybe they're off, work, or the kids are home from school, so it's a good time. But we tend to have pretty nice summers where it's really dry, and then the rain comes in the fall, and sometimes they have really big challenges with house training because the puppy was going out during the sunshine, but they're not used to rain. They hadn't been exposed to rain during perhaps that sensitive period. And so one of the things we can do and probably should do with our puppies, especially in the Pacific Northwest, is maybe put on a sprinkler during the summertime and get them used to being in the rain so they're ready for it when it comes in the fall time and the winter. If you live in an area where you get a lot of snow, once again, you adopt the puppy maybe in the late spring, haven't seen snow, that could be a challenge for that puppy. And so trying to figure out ways, whether it's getting a lot of ice out and putting it outside, or perhaps going, if you have the ability, up a mountain to expose them to snow during the sensitive period and trying to make it fun and exciting for them, that could be helpful. If you live in a rural situation and don't know if perhaps you're going to be moving to a more urban setting later in life, or vice versa, making sure that we get those puppies exposed to those different environmental living conditions, because they're very different. So the sounds and sights of a city would be very different even than a suburban area. And of course, the big one, we call it in the Pacific Northwest, we used to call it DINKs, dual income, no kids. They get their first kid, usually a puppy, and they tend to hang out with other DINKs, and that could be problematic then when the human child came along, when the puppy is now grown up to 10, but not really ever been around children. So making a concerted effort to get that puppy around children, knowing that at some point in the next decade or so, it may have that in its own life, and it would be great to have that early exposure to children. So just in one slide, I thought I'd put together our 6 tips that you'll want to remember to tell every new puppy parent when they come in. Don't delay Socialize today. Socialize in smart places. Prescribe parasite prevention. Make sure they have enjoyable socialization experiences. Out if overwhelmed, and socialize for today and tomorrow, the present and the future. I'll leave this resource slide up for a few minutes when we entertain some questions. I do want to point out that ultimatepuppy.com does have some wonderful, extensive social things to make sure your puppy is exposed to. So lists that owners can download for free and make sure that they get their puppy exposed to during this early life experience to hopefully protect our puppy and develop them into the most robust dog and good partner for life.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Neilson. And we do have a couple of really good questions, which I've just let take over my screen completely. So the first one is about puppy classes. I believe it's from a trainer but it's a veterinary question, saying this: we do a lot of socialization activities during class. We get some young, but it's still more common to get puppies close to the end of the socialization window. It is not uncommon for that to be because veterinarians are telling them to wait until the vaccinations are almost done or are done. Do you have suggestions for best practices to get the word out to vets in the community? I often encourage clients to share the AVSAB statement, but that's after the fact. And she wondered if maybe vets would be open to lunch and learns. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I hope that this effort today is one way to maybe overcome some of it, because I agree with you. We'd like them to be obviously in class enrolled, once again, as early as 8 weeks of age, after they've had a first vaccine on board. So I'm in complete alignment with you. I would say maybe that paper that I shared with you during that section we were talking about it, Stepita is the author on it, that looked at, once again, it was specifically looking at the risk of parvovirus, and none of the puppies who attended puppy class acquired parvovirus during that, and it was almost 300 puppies. So I think sharing the data and continuing to preach the message. I do want to mention, though, you bring up a good point. The window doesn't close totally. There's not like a shutting down that dogs can never be socialized. We still make efforts, but remember the study I shared, if we that was a very artificial environment. There was really no human exposure till 14 weeks of age. Most of our puppies get some, but we really want to advocate for earlier attendance at puppy class whenever possible. So I'm in alignment with you. I think we continue to talk about this, and I certainly do in my daily life. So I'm out there talking at lunch and learns, etc., and we'll continue to share this important message.
Great, thank you. Would you have a puppy start puppy class at least 1 week after the first vaccine?
Well, so it's an interesting question, because when we really think about that window of susceptibility to disease, you actually can't predict when it's going to happen in that course of that first few months, or excuse me, I should say probably somewhere between kind of, if they got colostrum from their mother, probably around 6 to 16 weeks of age. You don't know when it's going to happen. And so once again, I look at that balance of saying, I want the first vaccine on board. I'm not going to absolutely say they have to have 7 days, because we're not sure that first vaccine is going to give them any level of immunity, because they may have been, it may not have been able to do its job because of maternally derived antibodies. So I say have that on board, attend puppy class, once again, using appropriate cleaning and disinfection procedures in that class, but also making sure that the class doesn't allow sick puppies to come to class. So that's another important part of it. If a puppy's sick, it stays home. So all those things in place, I'm more inclined to say, let's get that puppy in the class as early as possible.
Great. One of the people who, one of the audience members had a suggestion for our first question, and it was only sent to the panelists, so no one else saw it. So I'm going to go ahead and just share it, which was, this was on the trainer with the pushback from the veterinary community about puppy classes until the puppies were older, to maybe talk with a few veterinarians in your community and see if they'd be willing for you to come in and do classes in their clinic, that maybe they'd be more open to that as they know their clinic's disinfection. So it's also, I would add, a good way to build relationships. So that's another possible approach. And then we have another question, specifically with the get out if overwhelmed tip at the restaurant with the food arriving. So say you haven't left yet and the puppy quickly goes back to baseline with no fear. So you haven't had a chance to get out yet. Now the puppy's fine. What, do you just wait until they get scared again, or don't get scared again and just don't do anything? I mean, what do you do?
Well, good news, you can probably finish your enchilada. So, but here's the point though. It is, so what I would do is say, okay, was that a one-off? Or is it going to continue to happen? So for example, if it was the waitress coming to the table that scared the puppy, you would know that probably at the beginning, because you know, they came up first, and then you might say, okay, we're not going to stay here and eat because it's going to come back and forth. So if it was the waitress coming up and you could somehow control that, maybe send the other person at the table to say, don't approach the table anymore, you know, we'll come and get the check, whatever that may be, you could probably stay and finish your meal. Or if maybe someone else was seated near you, or I don't know, someone walked by and you're in the pathway where people are coming in, and you could get yourself reseated away from the pathway so that trigger wouldn't happen again. Once again, stay in, you could finish your meal. But if you're thinking, I can't manage, that trigger will probably repeat and I'll continue to have experiences that are negative for the puppy, then I would probably box it up. Or in the case when I do this, I'm usually with my spouse, and so we have an agreement that, you know, I'll get the puppy out of the situation. He can finish whatever activity is going on. He gets to drink the wine, finish the enchiladas, the burritos, and I go away quickly. So it makes it more, makes it possible to do things like that. If I was socializing alone, I would not be committed to an activity that I couldn't get out of quickly. So if I had to pay or something like that, I wouldn't do it, because I want to be able to leave if that puppy is getting overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. That's all we have time for this evening. This is only a half-hour webinar, but we want to thank you again for being with us tonight, Dr. Neilson, to all of you for being here, and to Elanco for making this presentation possible. For those of you who are here attending the live webinar, I will be sending out the CE email in a few minutes. Remember to email me at fearfreepets@gmail.com if you don't receive it tonight. The CE survey is only open until Tuesday afternoon, so please take it right away. Thanks again, and we hope to see you for our next fear-free webinar, which is, I believe, on the 28th. And thank you all so much. Good night.